Hello, friend, and welcome to Inside the Dark. Thank you for joining me. We left part one with Bryn Spacher trying to convince everybody that she was in a state of psychosis when she brutally murdered Chad O'Melia, so she could in no way have prevented his death. Do you believe her? Maybe hearing her testimony when she took the stand will help you decide. The following account of Bryn's testimony was provided by the Ventura County Star, as cameras were not allowed in the courtroom. And warning, it contains additional graphic details that may be even more disturbing than what you've already heard. So, if you're an animal lover, she does reveal details that you may not want to hear. So you might want to skip past her testimony in this video, just to let you know. During Bryn's testimony, she described a feeling of deja vu, thinking she and O'Melia were having the same conversation over and over. She said she was unable to form logical words and sentences, and she laid on the couch with her eyes closed and began to hear and see things that weren't there, in a cycle that felt like it went on for hours. Here is her testimony as reported by the Ventura County Star. Spacher told much of her life story on the witness stand, starting with her childhood in a Chicago suburb. She was born with lung problems and suffered serious hearing loss shortly after birth, likely due to side effects of drugs and surgery, according to testimony from her mother, who was on the stand before Spacher. Spacher said she has worn hearing aids since she was 4 years old and also reads lips. During the trial, she's had a monitor in front of her with a live feed of the court reporter's notes. The monitor was set up for her at the witness stand. Spacher grew up as the only child with a hearing loss in most of her schools. She said she felt isolated, ashamed, embarrassed. I just tried to hide my hearing aids and focus on what everyone else was doing in school, which was sports, music, academics, she said. While in college, she decided she wanted to become an audiologist and help other people with hearing loss. She was accepted to Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, where she earned a doctorate in audiology. One of her professors testified Monday that he taught about 1,000 graduate students in his career, and none has ever been better than Bryn Spacher. In August 2017, Spacher moved to Thousand Oaks and started a job as an audiologist at UCLA Health Clinic. I loved working there and getting to know the patients, she said in court. It was very easy for me to be sympathetic with them or share my experiences with them, to relate to them and make them feel like they're not alone. Spacher's first home in Thousand Oaks didn't allow pets, so she had to leave her dog back in Illinois with her family. In April 2018, she started renting a room in a house where she could have Arya, her Siberian husky. She'd had the dog about 2 years and had trained it to be a hearing service dog, alerting her when the doorbell rang or when a car was approaching. Spacher started taking Arya to Conejo Creek Dog Park in Thousand Oaks. In late April, she met O'Melia there. He was with his German Shepherd, Athena. Spacher testified that O'Melia asked her for her number the first few times they ran into each other at the dog park, and she said no. But he gave her his business card, and she texted him. One day they shared a tiny bottle of Irish whiskey at the dog park, Spacher said. I thought he was very funny, she said. He was really nice to me. We were always sarcastic with each other. He ended up being a really nice, funny person when I got to know him. Spacher got to know Amelia's roommates and spent the night at their condominium a few times. On the weekend before Amelia's death, Spacher and a few other friends came over for drinks. Spacher testified that on that night, she had a few bottles of Smirnoff Ice and smoked for the first time out of Amelia's bong. Amelia was a regular pot smoker, while Spacher testified she didn't like smoking and had consumed cannabis only around 8 times in her life. Only once, the first time, she had gotten noticeably high from it. She had shared a joint with her then boyfriend on a camping trip and got the giggles and the munchies. On the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend in 2018, Spacher and Arya had been in Carpinteria with friends. Amelia invited her over in the evening, and she testified that she got to his condo at around 10:30 p.m. They hung out and chatted with each other and one of Amelia's roommates. After midnight, Amelia went to the patio to smoke from his bong, and Spacher joined him. She testified that she asked him for a hit from the bong. He prepared it for her, and she inhaled. All she felt, she said in court, was burning and coughing. They chatted for about 15 more minutes, and she told him about her experiences with cannabis and how it never did much for her. He acted kind of surprised, Spacher said. I don't remember his exact words, but he said something like, "Let's make this more intense for you," or "more effed up." Amelia put more weed in the bong, and this time he filled it with much more smoke than before, Spacher testified. He got up from his chair and turned the bong toward my face, rushed it to my face, and was pressuring me. Hurry up, hurry up. You've got to inhale, she said. It all happened so fast. I felt like I couldn't say no, and I inhaled out of the bong. She told her attorney that Amelia didn't grab her or use any physical force, but that she'd seen flashes of his temper before and felt, actually, kind of scared. In a note she wrote for police detectives when she was in the hospital, Spacher said she told Amelia she didn't want any more, and he made her smoke again. In her earlier testimony, Spacher said she began to feel unwell immediately after the second bong hit. She coughed uncontrollably, went to the bathroom to throw up, and staggered to the couch after that, the room spinning. The jury had heard numerous descriptions throughout the trial of Spacher's psychosis, but Tuesday they heard it from Spacher herself. She described a feeling of deja vu, thinking she and Amelia were having the same conversation over and over. She said she was unable to form logical words and sentences. She laid on the couch with her eyes closed and began to hear and see things that weren't there, in a cycle that felt like it went on for hours. Spacher said she thought she was dead. At first, she was stuck in a dead body and heard people crying over her and felt hands touching her. Then, she had an out-of-body experience and saw her dead body on the couch from above, with Amelia crying and paramedics trying to save her. In her testimony, Spacher said she remembers what happened next as if it happened to someone else. She described her actions as something she was watching on a screen, like a movie, shot from the point of view of its protagonist. She saw her own hands pushing over chairs and picking up 2 knives from the kitchen knife block. She threw them at Amelia and then picked up 2 more knives. She said she saw a brown dog, and her own hand stabbed the dog, and heard Amelia yell, "Why did you stab my dog?" The dog was actually hers. Arya survived that wound, but died last year after she got outside and was presumably hit by a car, Spacher said. Spacher testified that after she stabbed Arya, she saw herself advancing on Amelia. I saw the knife in my left hand penetrate Chad's abdomen area, and then it went black, she said, crying. After that, she remembers hearing voices, saying things like, "Keep going. Don't stop. You're almost there. You can do this." She saw Amelia on the floor bleeding and heard someone yell, "Bryn, what are you doing?" It was Amelia's roommate coming down the stairs. He ran back up for his phone ran outside and called 911, according to his testimony earlier in the trial. She kept hearing voices, this time from what sounded like emergency room doctors and her family members trying to wake her up. She started screaming for her family. As the screaming would be more intense, the vision was starting to lighten up, like I was coming back to life, she testified. I saw my hand grab the knife and point it toward my throat. Then it went black. I felt like 100 bullets going through my throat, and the harder that was happening, the more the light would show, and I was about to come back alive. Then she felt two shocks that she thought meant someone was bringing her back to life with a defibrillator. By that time, the police had arrived, and an officer was shocking Spacher repeatedly with a taser. Spacher said she blacked out completely and doesn't remember anything else until she woke up in the hospital. When she woke up, she didn't know what had happened to her or Amelia, or how much of what she remembered was real. She asked a police detective if Amelia was alive, but wasn't told that he was dead until a day or two later. In a different news article, also provided by the Ventura County Star, an audio recording of an interview a detective conducted with Bryn just days after the murder was also played for the jury, during which Spacher said that while she thought she was dead and saw her own dead body from above, she heard the voices of paramedics trying to save her and saw her mother crying with grief. This vision just kept cycling, she told the detective, for what felt like hours, even though less than a half an hour had passed between the two of them smoking and Spacher attacking Amelia. She said soon the voices were telling her that to bring herself back to life, she had to kill Amelia.
Since cameras were not allowed into the court, we were very thankful to Tony Biasotti with the Ventura County Star, who acted as our eyes and ears for that testimony. But you can only imagine what this testimony was like for Chad's family and Chad's father, Sean O'Melia, who is live with me now. Mr. O'Melia, thank you for being on. And again, I am so sorry that you're having to not only go through this, the loss of your son, but then also the testimony today. I can't imagine what it's like to be in your shoes. What was that like, listening to Ms. Spacher and what she had to say in court?
Well, I'll tell you this, Ashley. Again, thank you for having me. The whole trial has been exhausting for me and my family. It's very difficult when you have heard and heard the evidence, read all the statements, and then the individual who committed the act, committed the crime, wants to take absolutely no responsibility for their actions. It was hard. It was very difficult to listen to this. At times, but I will say this, I think her attorneys did her a tremendous disservice by putting her on the stand, because there has been an individual that they have portrayed as her, and today what was seen was somebody different. And it wasn't just in her behavior and in what she said. There was a lot of text messages that came out prior to her even meeting my son that demonstrated a behavior of alcohol use, large consumption. She had missed some work because of it. It's the truth kind of rolls out, and it has rolled out. And those text messages did also reveal, with those people prior to meeting my son, there was some marijuana use. The friends used the marijuana. Her attorneys have been talking about oils and wax that were never found at the scene. But in some of those text messages, she was communicating with her friends about the edibles, and that they were saying you can put the oil on ice cream and eat it. So, and then there was a period where she started speaking and was asked about my son, and she said, well, he was a nice guy, he was easy to be around, he was funny. But then when it came time to talk about the bong loads, she claimed to be intimidated by him, and none of this information was in any of her prior statements. It's just stuff that's, she's speaking about today.
And sometimes juries get angry if a murder defendant starts to point the blame towards a victim, or if they perceive it that way. Mr. Amelia, did you get a chance to really get a read on this jury? I mean, sometimes they tend to look over to family members of victims and really sympathize. Are you getting that feeling at all from this jury?
I think they're doing a good job of paying attention. I wouldn't say I would be somebody that could read a jury or read the jury, but given what they've heard that somebody has stabbed somebody 108 times, and today was her opportunity to show the jury that she had some form of remorse for her actions. And it was really clear that in her testimony that everything was about her, me, me, me. I can't count how many times I heard her say me. Now, I realize this is not good for her or her family either, but there is a victim here, and she is not the victim.
Right. The victim's name is Chad O'Melia, your son. Sean, thank you so much for being on tonight. I would love to reconnect with you as this trial comes to a close, possibly even at the end of this week. And I am praying for justice for you and your family.
Thank you, and I appreciate what you're doing, Ashley, trying to bring some attention to marijuana and the strains of marijuana that are coming out. They need to be regulated. In this case, it wasn't a very high potency marijuana, and what I did learn here, there are three elements to the situation: the marijuana, the vessel that's used, the bong, and the person. Now, it seems to be the person is the issue here. But thank you, and yes, I'll be back when you have me back.
My heart goes out to Chad's family and loved ones. They certainly went through it. But it wasn't over yet. The judge, who didn't feel that any one of the 4 knives Bryn used to assault Chad, including the 2 she remembered using to stab him to death with, could be considered to be deadly weapons, had yet to deal Chad's family one final blow. He said after hearing Bryn's testimony about her hallucinations that night, hearing the testimony from the experts and seeing the police body cam video, he determined that within minutes of inhaling the bong smoke for the second time, Spacher began hearing and seeing things that weren't there. From that point forward, she had no control over her actions. So he sentenced her to 2 years probation and ordered her to perform 100 hours of community service for the brutal and fatal stabbing of Chad O'Melia.
30 outrage from the family members of the victim after a woman who stabbed a man to death is sentenced to probation. Bryn Spacher was convicted of involuntary manslaughter just last month.
She claims to have been under a marijuana-induced psychosis when she killed a man she had been dating. KTLA 5's Lauren Lister live now in the newsroom with reaction from the family of the victim. Lauren.
Yeah, Glenn and Lou, we are hearing from the victim's family after that woman found guilty of stabbing their loved one over 100 times in a marijuana-induced psychosis is sentenced. The judge today giving the defendant 2 years felony probation, not prison time. No cameras in the courtroom, but reaction outside.
How I felt was it's just an unjust determination.
Family of slain Thousand Oaks 26-year-old accountant Chad O'Melia devastated today after his convicted killer, 32-year-old Bryn Spacher, who's been out on bail since the 2018 slaying, was sentenced today and given no time behind bars.
It's been 5.5 years where she has got to live with her family, and we get to live with a box of ashes.
Last month, the jury found Spacher guilty of involuntary manslaughter, of stabbing O'Melia, a man she'd been dating a few weeks, 108 times with 3 different knives, while in the throes of a marijuana-induced psychosis.
These are things everyone agrees on. What we don't agree on is that she should have walked free today after doing what she did. It's a very sad day for victims of crime. It's a very sad day for this family.
At the scene of the killing, officers reported finding Amelia dead and Spacer screaming hysterically, still holding the knife, stabbing herself in the neck. Spacer faced up to 4 years in prison plus sentencing enhancements. The judge saying, given the facts of the case, he didn't think it was warranted.
He took into account her lack of criminal record, her professional standing in the community, and that she did in fact suffer from severe psychosis at the time of the killing and really did not know what she was doing.
The judge citing evidence and expert testimony, also saying it proves Spacer did not know marijuana would have this effect on her when she smoked with Amelia at his apartment that night. The victim's family concerned about a broader impact.
I think he set an absolute terrible precedent in the state of California where it's okay to kill somebody after you smoke marijuana.
Does it set a precedent? I don't know if it does, but it's certainly a case that defense counsels will cite when asking for probation in a case like this.
If Spacer violates her parole, the judge says she will get 4 years prison time. She does also have to do 100 hours community service. Bryn Spacer, her family, and attorney did not speak after the sentencing, and the attorney has not returned my call either. The defendant did address the judge today, though, very tearful, begging for forgiveness, saying she will spend her life doing good for others.
Some say it's a shocking outcome to a case out of Ventura County. A Thousand Oaks woman will serve no prison time for stabbing a man more than 100 times. She was found guilty by a jury, but she was also found to be in a cannabis-induced psychosis.
NBC4's Conrad Dickerson joins us live from the Ventura County Courthouse with the outrage from the family of the man killed and what the prosecutor has to say. Karma.
Yes, that man killed was just 26 years old, stabbed 108 times by a then 27-year-old woman. Now, the prosecutor wanted jail time. The man's family wanted jail time, but a judge disagreed. When this woman was wheeled mumbling and bloody from a Thousand Oaks apartment in May of 2018, all that was clear publicly at the time was that she was hurt and a man was dead. It would turn out that she, Bryn Spacer, killed the man, Chad Amelia, in a marijuana-induced psychotic state. And Tuesday, a judge decided she would not serve any prison time for doing it.
This guy just gave everybody in this county a license to kill people after they smoked marijuana.
That was Chad Amelia's father, Sean Amelia's reaction when he heard Spacer was sentenced to probation. Not an appropriate end, as he sees it, to the events that unfolded that night.
She inhaled, and then from that point on, she went into a psychotic state shortly thereafter. She picked up 3 different knives from his kitchen, and she slaughtered him, penetrating every major organ, all over his body, his face.
Spacer stabbed Amelia, the man she was dating, over 100 times. The two had smoked marijuana, and Spacer had a catastrophic reaction. Prosecutor Audrey Nafzinger says body camera shows the woman didn't even realize when police had arrived.
When they arrived, she was kneeling over him, covered in blood. He was dead on the ground, and she was stabbing herself with a 10-inch serrated red knife, covered in blood, in the neck multiple times. She severed her carotid artery, or she cut her carotid artery, nicked it. They had to tase her 4 times.
Prosecutors in defense agreed that the marijuana led Spacer to a cannabis-induced psychosis, which is why she was charged with involuntary manslaughter, not murder.
And it's just another way that somebody can become psychotic under the influence of a mind-altering drug. Marijuana is a mind-altering drug.
A jury convicted Spacer last month. The prosecution requested the maximum sentence, 4 years.
Well, let me tell you, when people become voluntarily intoxicated and bad things happen, we do find that legal consequences need to happen. People need to go to jail.
However, the judge disagreed.
So, are you convinced that Bryn Spacer is telling the truth? I mean, she even convinced the judge she was, even though the jury wasn't buying her story. But just in case you're still on the fence, here are clips from 2 interviews Bryn held after she walked free.
But tonight, Bryn Spacer joins live, along with her attorneys and my esteemed colleagues from Los Angeles, Bob Schwartz and Michael Goldstein. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Bryn, thank you for being here. I know this is very difficult for you each and every time you have to talk about this. I want to start with you first. When did you realize how bad the consequences of this psychosis were? In other words, you had killed your friend. When did you realize that?
Before I answer that question, I just want to make a statement.
Sure.
That every day I do think about Chad and his family and his friends, and I am so sorry for their unthinkable loss and the immense pain they will endure forever. I didn't find out that he passed until days later when I woke up from the hospital. And when I did wake up from the hospital, that's when I knew that there was something bad happened, but I wasn't given answers right away. And I was very scared, confused, and shocked, and I didn't know what was going on. And throughout the days in the hospital, I was starting to figure out more and more what was happening, and later found out about Chad.
I mean, I can't even begin to fathom the trauma around all of this, the trauma that you're living with that, frankly, I don't think will ever really fully go away. And I think it's none of us can really fathom this. So, you know, are you in therapy? Is there I mean, there's got to be PTSD associated with this. How are you coping? What are you doing?
I immediately started seeing a therapist in California within 6 months of the incident. It took a while to find the right one, but she specialized in PTSD, and I saw her for years. And then when I went to Illinois, I saw another therapist. So I was seeing 2 therapists over the years. And then with the immense support from my family and friends and having the right resources, and my faith in God helped me get through this horrible, horrible thing that has happened to both families.
And so you have a support system in place that you can basically rely on. As you know, I know I've never experienced anything, of course, like this, but I've had PTSD from certain events in my life, and you never know when it creeps up on you, you know. And I'm glad to hear that you have the support system that you can rely on as you need it. Now, I understand you're working with an organization called Every Brain Matters. Can you tell our viewers what that is and what you're doing with that organization?
Yeah, it's a nonprofit organization that is working to fulfill my court-ordered public education hours. And they are educating the public about cannabis-induced psychosis and the potential harms from it, including that it could lead to violence. And so that's how I'll be getting my community service hours with them.
And, you know, if you could say something to Chad right now, I know you addressed the family. If you could talk to Chad and say something to him, what would you say to him?
I am so sorry that he had to go through that. There's no way I would have ever hurt him. And I'm just so sorry that he went through that pain.
Yeah, it's
I don't know.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
The jury didn't buy into our defense, so to speak. But Judge Worley, of course, as courageous as he was, he righted that wrong, and he did what he could in terms of sentencing.
Right.
He sentenced her to probation, no time, and you know, in a jurisdiction like Ventura, that was a very courageous decision by Judge Worley.
No, and it was. Let me just toot your horns. You guys are great lawyers. I think Bryn is lucky to be alive, and also very lucky and fortunate that she had you two. I want to just get to.
And by the way,
Bryn.
sorry, just could jump in on that point. When you say she's lucky to be alive, let me expand on that. The reason that Bryn is lucky to be alive is that when the deputies came in, as you alluded to, she was stabbing herself, and they told her to drop the knife. She kept stabbing herself. They tased her, as you mentioned, 4 times. She kept stabbing herself. One of the deputies struck her with a steel-tipped baton 9 times before finally dislodging the knife from her hand. Only because of the intervention of that deputy is Bryn still alive.
Yeah. And Bryn, I want to give the last
keep in
word
mind,
to
Sarah.
Yeah.
Sarah, the district attorney's office had all of this body-worn video available to them from the very early stages of the case. They had a series of notes that were taken by her when she was intubated in the hospital as she woke up the next morning after several surgeries. So they had the body-worn video. They had the marijuana that was recovered at the house. They had her notes about how she was feeling and the fact that she didn't want to take that second hit. And all of these things could have been reviewed during a pre-filing review of the case. But the district attorney's office decided to file a murder, and ultimately down the line, years down the line, they made that decision to dismiss the murder once our experts reached their decisions.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I've had 5 cases in my career in Ventura County. I want to end with you, Bryn. What is the takeaway for our viewers? What is the one thing you can share that, is the message from this horrific nightmare, really, that you went through?
I don't think marijuana should be promoted as safe to use. And there definitely needs to be some more education that psychosis can happen and that cannabis needs to be regulated.
Really? Okay. I know there are a lot of people that disagree with you, but I agree with you.
I know.
But,
Bryn Spacer was convicted of involuntary manslaughter.
The violence captured national headlines and fueled true crime podcasts.
After she was finished stabbing Chad 108 times.
So extreme, it drove some to protest.
Justice for Chad! She's a murderer! She's been convicted! She needs to go to prison!
Now the woman behind the mugshot is ready to talk.
I mean, this is her choice. This is nobody making her do anything.
I'm just like sweating bullets right now.
It's all right. It sucks.
I had no intention to hurt him. I never would hurt anybody.
It was Memorial Day weekend. After a visit to the dog park, Bryn and Chad went back to his apartment.
It was the most horrific thing to watch, because there was no thought or emotions or motors, feelings, sensory feelings of any kind. There was nothing. And it was just like I was watching a TV screen of just all this awful thing happening.
With what prosecutors say was 3 knives from the kitchen, she stabbed Chad, the serrated edges of the knives leaving him with 108 wounds. Bryn even stabbed her dog, Aria, and herself.
Dissociation of reality. And you don't have no sense of time, you have no sense of judgment, morality, emotions. It's the scariest thing.
Ventura County Sheriff's deputies responded, their body cameras recording. That video evidence remains under seal, but both Bryn's defense team and the Ventura County prosecutor have watched it many times.
She carved up his face. The stabbing was horrific.
One of the deputies shoots her with a taser gun 4 times. So these electrical wires go into her body 4 times. She keeps stabbing herself.
Another deputy forced to use his metal baton for the first time in his career. It took 9 blows to break Bryn's arm, finally freeing the knife from her hands.
They saved my life, and I'm forever grateful for them.
Bryn, covered in blood, was rushed to the hospital where she underwent surgery and survived her 43 stab wounds. Her mom flew from Chicago to take care of her.
She was going, ask Chad what happened. I don't know what happened.
It was just a matter of trying to, just consciously waking up. It was a matter of trying to explain to the detectives what I was experiencing, but saying it in a way where it was like, but I know I didn't do it, but I saw this happening.
Bryn spent 6 days in jail.
Nope.
Late last year, a jury convicted Bryn.
When you were
waiting for that sentencing, what did you think was going to happen?
Oh, I really thought I was going to prison.
But that's not how the judge saw it. Court transcripts quote him saying, "No one could have foreseen that a single hit of marijuana that night would have caused Miss Spacer to have a total psychotic break from reality. Certainly not Chad, and certainly not Miss Spacer. In light of these facts, I do not believe that further incarceration of Miss Spacer is appropriate." Chad's father calls the sentence a travesty of the system.
What does she have to do? Nothing? Nothing after taking another human being's life? That's not accountability. Probation, talking to people. I mean, that's not justice.
And what do you want the Amelia family to hear from you now?
I am so sorry. I am so sorry that they have to live with a hole in their life and will forever not be able to be with Chad anymore. And that they have to grieve. And I just hope and pray that they find some compassion and forgiveness. I just hope that my story will save somebody else's life.
Bryn is appealing her conviction for that felony as she works to obtain a license here in Illinois to continue her career as an audiologist.
I'm going to end this video expanding on something Bryn touched on briefly during her testimony. Her ex-boyfriend. The one she said she was camping with the first time she ever got high. He gave an interview talking about how he felt after learning about Chad's murder. He said, "I do remember it being very hard to read, and just being in shock and disbelief. But right away, I thought to myself, something else happened. This isn't the whole story." He said he and Bryn decided to smoke during a hiking trip in 2015 because she didn't want to be at some house party and try it. He said, "I knew we were going to be out camping. I thought it'd be a pretty cool place to try it for the first time." So we were actually out camping next to a waterfall. Pretty cool for a spot to smoke. But Bryn took, and I believe, only one hit. I took one at first, and then took another, only because I've smoked before. Bryn said something like, "Hey, I'm not sure if I'm high." I looked over at the bag of chips she was holding, which was a family-sized bag of chips, and the whole thing was almost gone. So I pointed out, "Well, you've almost finished that whole bag of chips just by yourself." And we both sat there for a second, and then just started laughing. That was so funny. I'm glad he has fond memories of his time spent with Bryn, and that his first experience smoking with her was a good one. But since her trial, I have to wonder if he ever thinks about what would have happened had he encouraged her to take a second hit that day by the waterfall. Or if he just looks up and thanks his lucky stars every day that he didn't. Thank you for joining me for part 2 of this episode of Inside the Dark. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more dark stories. And remember, never venture inside the dark alone.